I'm Jeremy Smith. I'm Chairman of Wittersham Parish Council. You can hear the issues, of course, about microphones that are on.
We might get a bedtime story.
Someone trying to get their machine to work, or the radio's on or something. Okay, yes, so I'm Jeremy Smith. I'm Chairman of Wittersham Parish Council. I hope everyone can hear me all right and see me all right. Welcome to everyone attending the meeting tonight. In particular, one or two who, just make sure people know who they are. Mick Burgess is here somewhere. He's our ward councillor at Ashford Borough Council. Chris Lee, who I saw earlier, she is from Stone, but she also edits the Outlook on Oxley, or she chairs, I should have said, not edits, but she's editing it at the minute. She chairs the Outlook on Oxley committee. The clerk at King's North is intending to be here, but to see how they get on, because they're going to do a public meeting shortly and they wanted to find out any lessons from us. And the developer who's proposing this site, that will be Daniel, who I can see there, I think, Daniel O'Brien, yes? He's proposing the site behind Lloyd's Green and Poplar Farm. The developer who proposes the Stocks Road site, they decided not to attend tonight as they already got feedback from residents when they put their online consultation up before Christmas. So we don't have them here tonight. First, I need to make a few introductory remarks before we get into the business of the meeting, so I'll go through them quickly. Since Jackie Weaver, the famous Jackie Weaver, infamous really for the proceedings at Handforth Parish Council, let me start by setting out the context for the meeting here tonight so everyone is clear. This is technically a parish meeting. I called it as Chairman of the Parish Council, as I'm entitled to do. It's covered by the Local Government Act 1972, Schedule 12, Para 17, Sub-Para 1, which I know you keep by your pillow. It stipulates that I automatically preside at any parish meeting if I'm in attendance, which I am. And I don't expect the person hosting the Zoom session, Councillor Paul Venning, to turn me off. Tonight we're having a virtual meeting, and that's not as I would have chosen, probably nor would any of you. Apart from us all being warm and snug at home on a cold night, this is very much second best in my view compared to having a proper meeting in the village hall. But we have to do what we can in these times. Now, because we are on Zoom, it will make some things more difficult than if we were getting together in person. I thought we were going to have about 48 people, devices, which we have. That means that even for those with a big screen, you don't get more than 25 faces on it at a time. So we have to be a bit patient and recognise that it will be harder to spot who's wanting to talk. Paul will keep an eye out, and I've explained on the invitation that we sent you to the meeting how you can make yourselves known by putting up a big yellow hand or with menu choice, or if you are visible on where you are visible on the camera, waving your arms about until someone sees you, or something like that. The problem is that if everyone shouts out, then it actually just banjaxes the system with these number of people, and it gets into complete confusion. Everyone gets fed up and nothing gets done. So I would just ask you, please, to try and be patient in that way. That would help us a lot. Now, I might need to exercise discretion on time if we're to get through within the length of a meeting that people can endure. Zoom is a tiring way to meet for everybody. So please, can I ask that none of you repeat what you've already said? It's very easy when you're making a point to say it 3 times for emphasis. And also, if other people have already said what you want to say, feel free to say, I agree with so-and-so. He made a good point, or she made a good point. But please don't keep saying the same things, because all it does is keep other people with viewpoints from making them. Now, as far as the agenda is concerned, we've got 2 planning applications to talk about this evening. We'll take them one at a time, although I recognise that some general points might apply to both. First comes the outline planning application for 23 houses north of Poplar Road. I won't worry you with the reference. It's on the Ashford website. You've seen the reference before on the notice of the meeting. That's lying between Lloyds Green and Woodland View. It's part of the land that Ashford Borough Council included in its draft plan for 2030. That was in 2017. They thought at the time it was suitable for 40 houses. But they then later had it moved from the plan by the government inspectors who thought it was unsuitable. Now, this outline application is to consider only the access at this stage, with all other matters reserved. While some detail of the proposed scheme has been submitted in the application, it's not final and will be open to variation later, except that consideration of the access at this stage, which is what's being considered, is based on a figure of 23 houses. We'll then move on to the discussion of the full planning application. That was an outline, the first one. The second one is a full planning application for 30 houses north of Stocks Road, opposite the garage, roughly. Now, this is a full application, so it's already potentially providing everything needed for Ashford, either to approve it and it can start, or, of course, they can reject it. In reality, it would still be subject almost certainly to discussion of more details on the so-called reserved matters like materials, even were it approved at speed. So one is a full application, one is an outline. We will treat them both as the same, really. We'll treat them in the same way. The application at Stocks Road is the same one that we saw on the developer's website in early December. And some residents commented on it at the time as they were given the opportunity to. But there are now some further documents included on the Ashford website. The majority of this site, that's the Stocks Road one, was subject to an outline planning application in 2015 for 27 houses, but it was then from a different developer and a different plan. It was supported by the Parish Council back then, but rejected by Ashford, and an appeal was refused by the government inspector. Now, although the two applications we have in front of us tonight then are at different stages of maturity, we'll deal with them in essentially the same way as I mentioned earlier, jumping ahead. And tonight, as I said earlier, we have a parish meeting, which is for residents to explore their views together and for councillors to hear what they say. I might say it's actually not necessary officially for councillors to attend a meeting like this, but actually happily they're all here and I hope they're looking forward to it. Then we move on to next steps. The Parish Council will be meeting next Tuesday for an ordinary Parish Council meeting. It'll be extraordinary because it's not on a pre-arranged date, but it's in every way. It's really just like any other Parish Council meeting. Now, when they get there, and this is important to make clear, councillors are legally required then to make up their own minds at that meeting on which way they vote. They can have opinions tonight, and I hope they do, because they're not going to be able to read all the papers next Tuesday, but they should have regard when deciding what they decide to do to what they hear from you tonight. But I should stress it's not a matter of judging the level of support or not from the residents attending tonight. This has been greatly misunderstood in the past, so I thought it worth explaining. Councillors have to make up their own minds, unlike people like MPs. That means the points you make are important. The points you make are important. We want to hear them, but it's not a numbers game. It's not a referendum on the two schemes. And then what next? The decision on each application will be taken by Ashford Borough Council as our planning authority, not Wittersham Parish Council. Our Parish Council's view is advisory, and while Ashford must have regard to it, they do not have to agree with it. That's why it's important for all our residents who have a view, whether you're here tonight or not, positive, negative, or anything else, to submit them direct on the Ashford website in addition to anything you say here tonight, as those points will then be available to the decision makers at Ashford in addition to whatever remarks the Parish Council sends in. And now it's time to get to the discussion. We're here to hear from you. but where I think there may be a misunderstanding or I can offer any clarification or an answer to a question being raised, I shall try to do so. And I did see Zoe and Alex change their name. Thank you very much. So hopefully everyone is pretty much ready to go. And we'll start with the Poplar Road proposals. The thoughts that I had, just to start you off with things in your mind, points people may want to talk about, I thought, were perhaps the T-junction between the newly widened access lane up to the site and the Poplar Road, the freedom of manoeuvre in that area, the width of the access track and its chicane by Poplar Farm, the impact of the access on the Grade 2 listed Poplar Farmhouse and the impact of the access on other nearby properties. So they're the things, we're talking about access, they're the sort of starters for 10, I would say. And lastly, the proposal as a whole remains a reserved matter, as I explained, in terms of planning detail, apart from the access, but its existence of the access is the reason, the existence of the scheme is the reason for the new access being proposed, so you can obviously comment on it in that sense. And who would like to start us off? Who's putting a hand up? Hello, Yvonne. Oh, Yvonne, yes, you did tell me. Yvonne got in about 3 short emails from people who couldn't attend tonight, who asked for them to be read out. So I said, yeah, that makes sense. And if we start with them, that also gives other people the chance to think of their points and their questions. So Yvonne, please, go ahead.
From Mick Sweatman. And this is probably useful because he drives up and down that access road. My comments at this stage are mainly my concern with the access to this development. I have lived in Lilac Time Cottage for the past 13 years and have used the drive to my property many times. It's got more dangerous in the last few years. The B2082 Poplar Road is much busier now with lorries, buses, very large vehicles and trailers. It is the main route from Tenterden to Rye and carries a lot of traffic. The left-hand side of the road towards Tenterden is usually full of parked cars, as houses without garages require parking. The speed of traffic regularly exceeds the 30-mile-per-hour limit. When turning right out of the drive, on several occasions, vehicles have been coming towards the drive, mounting the pavement. I think that the introduction of a 2-lane access to this development would increase the dangers that already exist. The proximity of the village shop means that you also have cars and delivery vehicles backing onto the road. The bus stop is also situated close to this point. I would like to point out that I only share and have the right of way to the drive. However, he still uses it on a regular basis, obviously. Regarding the wider issues and the need for housing in the village, I believe that an alternative location with more favourable access would be more suitable. Sewage and drainage have long been a problem in the village, and this area would also need further consideration. This is from Christine Wood. The proposed route would cross land which has a history of flooding and have standing water for many months of the year. The access to and from the proposed road would cause severe problems for people in the village, as the access has limited visibility onto the road, and then it goes on to talk about the parked cars, etc., which I've already mentioned. She also mentioned the impact this road and all the work involved would have on our wonderful wildlife. We are so lucky to have such an abundance of birds, bees, hedgehogs, and they are already endangered due to destruction of their native habitat. And there are also great crested newts in the area. Therefore, I ask, surely there must be a safer alternative to the proposed application. This is from Patricia Wood, but it's talking about the same area, about the flooding, exactly the same, how wet it is all the time. In addition to the logistics and congestion to the village, the effect on the conservation of the ancient woodland will deeply be affected too. So that's the extras on that one. And then from Melanie Buxton, but I've already mentioned the parking, village shop. Oh, and this has got the village bus stop is also almost opposite proposed access. Further obvious danger. Wittersham village is not served by mains gas, therefore household heating is mostly supplied by way of oil tankers or large LPG lorries. Turning into and coming out of the proposed access in order to service 23 dwellings would be another cause of tailbacks and danger at this pinch point. If the proposed access road wide enough, is the proposed access road wide enough to accommodate this size of vehicle, and without them having to mount the proposed pavement due to the lack of turning space when coming from Tenterden direction and cars are parked in the road opposite? I doubt it. The tailbacks with vehicles stacking in the Tenterden direction on part of this road is already proving a danger due to there being a blind S-bend just before the area where the on-road parking starts. Larger tailbacks and hold-ups will make this blind spot even more dangerous. Have Kent Fire and Rescue Service addressed the issue of the turning space needed to enter the proposed access point when vehicles are usually parked opposite on this pinch point? Their letter only addresses the need for turning on at a dead end. In summary, it would be irresponsible to allow the proposed access causing extra traffic on this already dangerous and well-known pinch point. Thank you, they're mine.
Okay, thank you very much. I didn't say at the time, I could have done that. Those have all been copied to councillors anyway. It was really just for the rest of you to hear those comments that have been made. Okay, so who would like to start us off with any comments? I can only see one page at a time. So who is sticking a hand up? No one wants to be the first. Is everyone looking for where?
Can I say something quickly?
Yes, please. Who is it?
That's Roger Parker.
Oh, hello, Roger. Yeah.
It was just to say that listening to those emails and Mike Swetman's one, not that I use that drive at all, but the rest of it, absolutely agree 100% with what he says. I think he just about covered everything in that worries me as I take my daily walk through the village and I watch this happening along the main road on a daily basis. Vehicles going up on the pavement is not an uncommon occurrence, and I think that is very dangerous and unacceptable. But the rest of it, I absolutely agree with, and that's all I want to say on that.
Okay, Roger, I can see a couple of hands up here. I don't know which one went first, but Greg and Kate.
Greg and Kate, and then Roger.
Okay. Greg.
Thank you. I also agree with the points which have been made, but I just wanted to say that while the detail of this application is about the access, this is, of course, about the principle of the development as well. And given the capacity for the village to grow, it needs to be considered in relation to the other application. The village has an agreed, established, likely number of dwellings that it's going to grow by. And obviously 2 sites coming up at the same time is a significant issue. So the 2 applications do need to be thought about together.
Yes, thank you. I think this is one of those areas, Greg, and you coming from that business understand this as well as anyone does, I'm sure. We have this curiosity, as far as I can understand it, where planning applications are all dealt with individually, and yet the context is a plan. The statute makes it quite clear that it's a plan-led planning system. And so we sort of, on the one hand, have to consider everything in a wider planning context, and at the other side of it, we have to consider applications one at a time. And that is, frankly, catch-22. So I think that we all sort of understand the fact that they do both exist. You can hardly shut your mind off from one and do the other, and then, forget what you just did and do the first. But on the other hand, as I say, they have to be done to some degree individually. I think if you add them together in the simplest sense, there's 53 houses, and 53 houses in Wittersham is an enormous number. It's over 10% of our present, and we have about 530 or 540. That's not to say that each individual is not quite large as well. 23 or 30 are also quite big numbers, but plainly, a simple arithmetic says not as big as 53. And we have had big estates built before. Forge Meads and Jubilee Fields, between them, and Woodland View between them, come up to somewhere around 80 or 90, and they were built not in one lump, but built fairly quickly in a handful of lumps, so that I suppose, well, others will tell me, 20 years perhaps. So, you know, and in its time, Lloyd's Green was quite big just after the war. You know, so 25, 30 houses, so that's the fact of it. I think you're entirely right. You can't ignore the fact that they're both up together, and one would like to think Ashford won't either, but on the other hand, they will consider them as individuals. And of course, the other thing is that one's outline and one's full. So the irony is that Poplar Road came in first, but the other one was then ahead on the process because it's put in a full application.
Jeremy, Roger King's next.
Yes, I know. Roger.
Oh, thank you. I agree wholeheartedly with the points that have been made already. Very good points. I'm very dubious about access road to this outline planning thing. And I agree with Jeremy that I wish there was a bit more joined up thinking about all this on behalf of ABC. It seems to me that there isn't a cheap solution to the land at the back of Poplar Road. We're actually, or somebody is actually going to have to run a road around there, a proper access road. It can't be put off Poplar Road as proposed. It's absolutely absurd. And that's basically what I've got to say on that subject. So I yield to the next participant.
Thank you, Roger. There was in the plan that I mentioned earlier, the 2030 plan that Ashford put forward in very oversimplified terms, what one of my colleagues used to call big hand, small map. They thought that yes, there could be a road coming across from Woodland View and there could be a road coming across from the end of Lloyd's Green. Unfortunately, the inspector ruled both of those out. One for land availability, I think it was, and one for ecology with a pond. So I think that's probably why this is now looking at a new solution. But that's the new solution we now have to think about.
Jill Redford, next, Jeremy.
Oh, Jill, I can't see Jill on my page. I'll switch over.
Page.
I'm here, in spirit.
Oh, hello, Jill.
Hiya. Just to sort of go back just on what you said about the previous estates when they were built. They were pre-AONB designation. So the only one is Woodland View, that there was only 12 houses. Lloyd's Green, Forge Meads, Jubilee Fields, Swan Cottages were all built pre-Area of Outstanding Natural Beauty designation. So the process by which we have to consider anything now in this area is completely different. And with regard to the access, yes, totally agree with all that's been said. I would just add that obviously they have previously tried to come down through Lloyd's Green, and that wasn't a go because of certain issues, which I won't go into now, but it's been got rid of. Another one was they were going to come through at the White Cottage and take down two of Lloyd's Green's houses, or vastly get rid of one's garden and try and come in that way. That was a no-go as well. So this is the third option at the moment that they've tried. So it's just constant, I'm afraid, and they're coming at all angles at the moment. But I'm afraid I just think that the whole thing is wrong. So therefore the access is wrong. So you can't consider them as a separate entity really, because if you say yes to the access, technically you're saying yes to what's beyond it. So in my opinion, it's wrong all round. So, okay, I'll pass on now.
Thanks very much, Jill. I think this point about the AONB is an excellent point. If the others were built before that, my mind at the time was thinking about the number arriving in the village at the same time, rather than the fact that there is a different obstacle. And you're absolutely right. The question of the AONB is a big one. I can see it's down as Lara, but it's Lara's husband's. Welcome to the village. I think you just moved in the other week, didn't you?
Indeed, Jeremy. Yeah, no, thank you. Hi everyone. Laura and I are very fresh and new to the village, so perhaps somewhat less of a case to put forward really for this intrusion into the village, but we live on Poplar Lane at Swan Cottages, 7 Swan Cottages, so we live near enough opposite the proposed entrance, and agreed, where we moved from was a 2-lane road, but the parking was on the road, so it turned into a 1-lane road essentially. We can obviously see that, you know, we're contributing to that by parking on the road. We do have a intention to, we've got the ability to build a driveway, so at some point when we get planning agreement in place, we will be putting a driveway in. That's 2 less cars. But I believe the other houses along Swan Cottages are council owned. Some might be private, some council. I'm not sure what the ratio is. But I agree with everything that's been said. I agree the access is terrible. I agree there's better use for land than building houses on, particularly coming from an environmental and conservation background. There's more to do with land than build on. But I am saying, if in the end point where we really don't have a choice and everything is overridden, and Ashford Borough Council will go ahead with this regardless, perhaps a consideration into, if these houses are council houses and an agreement can be met with the residents of those houses, actually building and providing driveways for each of the house to get cars off the road, perhaps even just do it anyway, because it is an unsafe road, it is a single track. We can hear cars every now and then, a slight skid as cars brake fast and hard in order to avoid oncoming traffic, so there is a safety purpose involved. Although I believe Wittersham has a very good traffic accident record, that's not to say that something won't happen because of this. So perhaps a bit of forethought into, if there is an access issue, which there clearly is, if they do want to go ahead with this, perhaps consider offering the chance for the residents along this lane, along this street, to have off-road parking, regardless of council or privately owned. Perhaps make the process a bit easier, and yeah, I'm done.
All right, thank you very much. It's an interesting conundrum, because I've heard in the past, when I lived in Sevenoaks, the police refer to parking sometimes as informal traffic calming, because it naturally slows people down. Yeah, you're right. I mean, it is a problem that people park there, in the sense that it, you know, means you get one-way working, but obviously it normally works okay. Most people are aware of it. It's not very good, it's close to the bend. I know about your own proposals, and we'll see what happens to them as we get to the point of making them. Yes, some of the houses along there are owned and some of them are council. Everyone has the issue, of course, that your gardens are set down below the pavement, which makes it a little bit difficult. But it maybe is possible. That's Ashford's concern in due course. Yes, okay, thank you. The next person who wants to speak, who can I find?
Buxton.
Oh, the Buxton household, is that?
Yes, it is. I'd like to take up that Lara Morgan's point, her husband's point. The houses that he refers to, where you might be able to put parking, they are gardens for the residents. I don't think they have very big back gardens, some of those houses. Plus, Wittersham's going to start looking like one big car parking village if we start having to make car parking spaces to accommodate new housing. The village is going to start to look an absolute shambles.
Yeah.
Gardens are very pretty and the children are often playing out there. I mean, I don't agree at all with what the gentleman has said.
Okay, thank you for that. Melanie, is it? Yeah. Okay, who's next? Mervyn.
I think our view is that we would totally agree with what Jill Redford has said. I think the proposed entrance into that development is dangerous. and I think it is totally unsuitable. So I think it would astound me if Ashford even considered this site as for development. Stocks Road one, there are different issues related to that, and there are certainly the issues that Jill Redford raised as an AONBs, and I think the avoiding points that the developer has put forward as providing local needs housing is a lot less relevant now than it was maybe some years ago. So I think that the Stocks Road one is becoming increasingly questionable as a new development in an AONB.
Okay. Right, we'll get back to that insofar as that's a sort of self-standing point when we get to that one. But thank you, Mervyn. Who else would like to comment on the Lloyd's Green one, or Poplar Farm, as it's now known?
Can you hear me?
Who's that? Is that Miriam?
Miriam, yeah, I can't get my camera to work.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you perfectly.
Okay, sorry, I just can't get the camera to work. It's been disabled and because of the bandwidth on another meeting, and I don't know how to get it back on.
Wow.
Okay, just what I totally agree, and I'm not going to repeat anything, but I think that we really need to be looking at the principle of development in the village of this scale, either 23, 30 or 53. And I think that we should just quote back to Ashford's their own words in the advice that they've given on the 6th of October 2020, where they consider, and these are our words, it to be excessive and disproportionate. And they're talking now about 30 houses. They consider it, but about the Lloyd's Green site, we consider it to be excessive and disproportionate to the size of the settlement and the level, type and quality of day-to-day service provision. So the officers at Ashford have already said that 30 houses could not be absorbed in the village. So goodness knows what we are doing, looking at two developments, one of 23 and one of 30. I understand that they've got to consider applications that come in, but to my mind, the officers have already said we can't absorb it. We all know that our services, that the sewage system, we were told right back in 2008, there was someone from quite a high level from Southern Water came to the parish council meeting, David Nuttall, I believe his name was, and I asked him a straight question, whether, given the state of our sewage system, whether it was sensible to add any more houses or developments of houses. I mean, the odd house might, they obviously would take, any more developments, and his straight answer was no. I then had a letter to say that there was going to be a major works done to our sewage system, which would start in 2015. We are still waiting. We all know what we've seen in times of heavy rain, where the surface water system backs up and the sewage joins it, and we have sewage running down our streets. What are we thinking of even considering supporting either a scheme of 23 or 30 houses? So that's what I want to say.
Okay, thank you very much, Miriam. A couple of things struck me as you were talking. The three application you were talking about, that was Lloyd's Green, wasn't it? The one in
It was from the Lloyd's Green application, I think they've reduced it at that point to 28, but they were talking in general that 30 houses was excessive to the village of Wittersham. The services are the same for both sites. So 30 is excessive. It's excessive at Stocks Road. It's excessive at Lloyd's Green. It's excessive at the Meadows. Any site you like to take, it's excessive.
Okay, thank you.
So the village basically can't cope.
I just wanted to make sure, because of the number 30, whereas it's actually 23 now. I wanted to make
They went down to 30. I believe the Castleford Homes, the gentleman's here, he can perhaps ask him to confirm. But I understand that they started off with 30, they went down to 28, and now they've gone down to 23. I don't know what number Ashford actually think that we can take, but certainly not those high numbers.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to double check that. Now, the point on the sewage is an interesting one in two respects. I wasn't even here when you would have heard from David Nuttall. The thing about the upgrade of the sewage in 2015, I think it's possible that that was done because there was a lot of engineering work done at the sewage farm. I don't know whether the latter was referring to the pipe work or only to the farm, but they certainly had, since we've been here, they certainly had, I think it's Costain, and they're doing some upgrading work of some sort or refurbishment or whatever over a period of time. The other thing that I just heard today, which is of some value, because as you said, Miriam, and absolutely rightly, there are the occasions when the sewage system overflows and runs down the street, down in Swan Street, particularly near the Finches. And I'm told that Southern Water have undertaken now to the owner of the Finches that they will be doing major investigations into the problem which arises occasionally in that area within the next 2 or 3 months. Now, obviously, that's not the same as solving it, it's not the same as finding a solution. But having had a discussion with Yvonne on the subject this afternoon, I now understand that there is an abrupt 90-degree turn at a manhole just where it leaks out at the Finches, excuse me, and that's down the end of a long fall, a long slope from the top of Swan Street to the bottom. So bearing in mind, as you said, Miriam, that there is surface water combined with the sewage in the foul in some cases, not all, and you've got a long fall down Swan Street and then an abrupt right turn, that is absolutely made for blockages and for then coming out through the manhole. Now I know, as I said to Yvonne earlier, correlation isn't causation. That sounds like a very suspicious situation that they ought to be looking at. Okay, that was a little bit on sewage, which I hope is helpful. But incidentally, it is an unreasonable situation that these leaks happen on a periodic basis when there's heavy rain, and it really should be dealt with by the statutory undertaker, which is Southern Water, rather than just kept being left. And obviously, we can't avoid the fact that more houses equals more road. Sorry, who was that? I couldn't tell who that was.
I can't see anyone else with their hand up, Jeremy, although there are 5 people who are just there in name. So if you do want to speak and you haven't opened your video, perhaps you could just raise the hand. Actually, we've got Philip has got his hand up.
Yeah, Phil, hello, go on.
You need to unmute.
You're still on mute, Phil.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, wonderful.
Right. Okay. Well, a couple of things. I agree almost entirely with the people who made the objections to the development of the 23 houses at Pop Farmhouse. I think that is a bad idea from start to finish. With regard to the Stocks Road development, when this came up in the first place, I remember saying that if we reject that one, then we stand the risk of them putting in an application for maybe 40 or 50 houses. Well, we then, not very long after that, had an outline application, I think, in for 40 houses down by Lloyd's Green. So that, I think, is the danger. But I understand the concerns of the residents close to the Stocks Road development very well. If it did go ahead, I think it should have its own self-sustaining sewage system, and the an entry onto the road there should be very deep thought about, because I know that Roger takes his life in his hand every time he walks along that road, and he says the speed of traffic is actually going up. So if it went ahead, then I think the 30 mile an hour light sign should be moved much further back and some speed limiting facility put in. As far as the environmental concerns are, the AONB is a very valid point, and the view of this development would, in some people's minds, be a negative impact on the environment. As far as the actual natural environment is concerned, that soil there is absolutely sterile. It's been filled with farm chemicals for many years, and nothing will exist in the soil. If you get a small pinch of soil and put it under a microscope from healthy soil, it's full of minute organisms. You wouldn't find it, I very much doubt, in that field. And the conservation measures would mean that if that development did go ahead, then it's a much healthier environment for wildlife than the field as it is, because you would have trees, you've got a green corridor, you've got all kinds of conservation measures, and that would be a benefit to a much, it would become a much richer wildlife environment than it is at the moment, very much so.
Okay. Well, Phil, thank you for that. A couple of points that come out of what you said, just in terms of clarification. This Stocks Road proposal, were to be approved, includes moving the 30 limit further out of the village, but also the particular point you made about Roger Parker walking down from the far side of the garage. It does include a footpath from roughly opposite their front down to join onto the main village footpath. So actually that problem there, that particular problem would be solved. Of course, it's solved for the 30 new houses, but it would also be solved for the handful of houses that are there, namely Roger, his neighbour, Safara, and Miriam's if she comes out through the footpath by the garage. Okay.
Sorry. Could I've got to come in there, Jeremy. I'm sorry. I can't wave a hand. I can't find out how to wave my hand. But it isn't solved. You're talking about. We've suddenly started talking about Stocks Road development when I thought we were talking about the Poplar Farm.
You are right.
And I'm afraid your comment there that problem has been solved is entirely not right. I don't disagree with you, as you know, but I do on this occasion, to make a definitive statement like that is not correct. But do you want to come on to Stocks Road now, or are we going to talk about?
No, we'll come back to that then. If I've exaggerated the case, then you must correct me later.
I will do.
Okay.
Thank you.
If we're still on Poplar Road, I think Jill Redford's got a hand up.
Yes, good. And so is Colin, I can see.
Colin.
Okay, so Jill first.
Okay, with regard just to the access, I don't know if it was mentioned, I might have missed it. There are 2 bus stops there, one either side of the road, right where the parked cars are. And also there's not been much mention of pedestrians. Now they come down from Forge, Meads, Jubilee Fields, and that they have to cross the road into backing traffic that's coming out of the shop, as well as the traffic coming along the either way from Rye or Tenterden, and then on top of that you're going to have traffic coming out literally from all directions if you include Poplar Road and Poplar Farm in that as well. So I just think it's a catalogue of disasters, but that was just something to add for that. With regard to the sewage, I can tell you down Lloyd's Green we have the MTS sewage lorries down here on a regular basis. They're always down here because this sewage system is a wreck and it can't cope with what we're getting from all the other, because it all feeds into one and comes down here into there's like a pumping area and they're always here. So the system is absolutely shot to pieces. So to think it can even go near taking any form of a housing development of any size is, I'm afraid, ridiculous. Just a quick thing with the AONB and the gentleman and his soil. The soil isn't the question, it isn't the point. The AONB designation is the landscape. This village is part of the landscape of the High Weald. It doesn't matter about the quality of the soil. It's been farmed as pasture for decades, hundreds of years since medieval farming. And the whole point of the AONB is what it represents as a historic landscape. So you have to make considerations with development. It has to be, is it exceptional? There has to be an exceptional reason why you think you can develop here. You have to say what your exceptional reasons, demonstrate those. Is it in the public interest? Are these developments in the public interest? Is there a justification need for these quantity of houses or whatever? Any, an assessment harm? Are they going to cause harm to an already designated important landscape? So it's not actually sort of the criteria of the soil or the individual, it's what it represents as a larger designation. I've got Claire Tester, she's written a response today, and I'm just trying to find it quick, and it will be on the Ashford Borough Council website. And she referred back to the field at Lloyd's Green before and the inspector's report. And he said it is located within the High Weald and abuts an area of ancient woodland. It forms an attractive area of open land, which allows the countryside to penetrate the built form, which basically represents a historical settlement outline. They're not all straight lines. In historical form, they're very irregular and interspersed with countryside. It's therefore important in broad landscape terms and overall character of the village. And she goes on to say, these comments apply to this current site. Indeed, this is only the part of the proposed original site, but it is the part that penetrates the built form, and it is therefore important to the landscape and the overall character of the village. So that's just on this little bit here. So she's saying in her findings, which you'll find on the Ashford Borough Council website shortly, hopefully, and you'll be able to read her whole response to the thing, but that is just sort of a gist of what she's sort of said regarding AONB, etc.
Thank you, Jill. I think what you just said is very important. The inspector, when he took the site S61 out of the Plan 2030 3 years ago, he said some of the same things about the Lloyd's Green field and the way it fits into the village, as you've just talked about, Claire Tester from the AONB unit. Land between Lloyd's Green and Jubilee Fields is located within the High Weald AONB and abuts an area of ancient woodland that forms an attractive area of open land which allows the countryside to penetrate the built form of the village. We recognise the same words. The site is therefore important in broad landscape terms. He then went on about other things on that site, but that was at the AONB. Now, of course, you're right to say AONB is a landscape designation, essentially outstanding natural beauty. The AONB that we're just in it, runs from the urban boundary of Horsham, the other side of Crawley and Gatwick, through to between Stone and Appledore. We're only just in it. And it then skirts around Tenterden. It has holes in it for Tunbridge Wells, Heathfield and Crowborough, skirts around East Grinstead. The AONBs as a whole are massive. This one is one of the big ones. Now, obviously, it's been designated for outstanding natural beauty, and when they did it, whatever it says, they didn't actually expect that would mean no houses at all, or no houses unless they were truly exceptional, because plainly it would never work. However, it does say quite clearly that you have to have regard to the AONB, and that's a balance that Ashford will have to make as the statutory planning authority under the Countryside and Rights of Way Act, Section 85. they have that balance to make. And it's a very difficult balance because, as you pointed out, at one level, you can't have it. You can't do it. And at another level, well, if you never do any of them, then that doesn't work either. So I think that it is another one of these catch-22s. I think that the AOND is important. I think that it's handy that we are in the AOND. It indicates that we're in an area of important landscape, particularly, as I keep being told, because of the medieval field pattern. That's what they keep coming up with when I ask. Well, it's the medieval field pattern in the High Weald, going right across that stretch of England, because the medieval field patterns are being changed. But the view of the landscape in that immediate area would be, and there's a balance to be made. Okay, do other people have things they want to say or ask about? Yes, Colin, sorry, I saw you before and forgot you.
What I want to say is not as a parish councillor, but as a next door neighbour to Poplar Farm.
That's fine.
I totally support the comments which have already been raised concerning the infrastructure around Poplar Farm, and totally agree with what Mr. Sweatman had to say earlier on in his rendition. I thank those individuals who were able to send copies of their comments to parish councillors today, because it was extremely helpful in looking at the overall programme. Living next door, we have great difficulty at times on site, on volume, on cars, on tractors, on buses, and it is a continual difficulty in getting into Poplar Road. So I share all your concerns. What concerns me is that we should be requiring both fire, police and environmental services to undertake a specification as to the ability of any of those vehicles getting into the proposed new activity. Secondly, I note that in fact is when the inspector made his decision in respect of Poplar Farm, he said it had to be removed. It is now back on the agenda. And thirdly, and this is more important for me as an individual, in the recent letter that the developer got from Ashford Borough Council, they recommended to the developer that they should consult neighbours, politicians, parish councils and anybody else before taking this matter forward. And I just share that with you because that's very important, that there's been no consultation, as far as I'm aware, by Poplar Farm or the developers. Thank you.
Thank you, Colin. One point you did just make there of interest, the fire, police and environmental. As you know, there's been a letter in already from the fire service, which is quite interesting. They didn't comment, and I asked them about this, they didn't comment on the access up the lane and from Poplar Road into the lane, because they said they rely on KCC for that, whereas KCC haven't been consulted. And I did point out to them that on the face of what they did ask for, which is the turning circle at the far end if the site is built, that the things didn't seem to add up, because the fire brigade require a turning circle between walls of 19.2 metres for a small appliance, the ordinary fire engine as we call them, and 29 metres for a larger hydraulic ladder or whatever, hydraulic platform or ladder or whatever. And if you think that the road there is 6.1 metres wide, and the lane they turn up into is 4.8, normally 5.5 for a side road, but that one's only going to be 4.8 with a 6 metre radius. It's hard to, I couldn't figure out how a vehicle that needs 19.2 metres to turn around 180 degrees does 90 degrees within the space it's got, certainly once it's parked. So that seems to be a problem, and I'm hoping that they're looking at that again. As I say, they just felt, oh, if Kent's all right, then it'll be all right. But Kent wasn't being asked. And the other one you mentioned was environmental for the dust bags and bin wagons. And I did ask the head of environmental service, that part of the environmental service in Ashford, if he was aware of it, in case that was a problem. I was told that yes, they do get them all and look at them, but he would make sure that was being given proper consideration, because obviously it will be of no help to the developer or anybody else if it doesn't work. There is a 3.1 metre narrow section partway up the lane, which is for the stated purpose of slowing traffic down, although they're not going to have much distance to speed up anyway. 3.1 is the minimum the fire brigade will accept to go through a gate, but this is 3.1 metres along a 20 metre stretch. So again, I don't know how they'll get on with that. Okay, that's just reacting to the things you said, Colin. Who else would like to talk about Lloyd's Green or Poplar Road? Let me just look at the other page. Yes, Daniel. Yes, can I ask you to come back on the points everyone's made at the end? I think that would be the best.
Oh, okay. Oh, wait. Okay, sorry, I thought I can't.
I think so. If there's, maybe everyone has finished now. Is there anyone else who'd like to raise anything on Lloyd's Green, Poplar Farm, and then we'll ask Daniel if there are things that you can tell us that might. Oh yes, the Buxton household, Melanie, I think it is, or Michelle.
I'm deeply concerned about the increase in pollution from, there's going to be 100 odd vehicles using this driveway. Now they're going to be sitting there revving up their cars waiting to pull out, and I think the level of pollution in this area is going to increase quite dramatically. And there's a lot of studies out now regarding pollution particles and how damaging they are to the respiratory system, etc. Actually, it was on the news today, I've been told. The other thing is Poplar Farmhouse have applied to open up their old access. So there's going to be yet another access along that road nearer to the shop. And it's going to be an absolute black spot there, really, for accidents. My mother nearly got knocked over coming out of the driveway when a vehicle had mounted the pavement. You're obstructed there with high hedges. It's totally ridiculous to even consider having an access from what was an agricultural farm track. It's ludicrous, it really is. And little children, there's lots of parked cars, the children running to the shop. I mean, very soon there will be a serious accident there. In the summer, that road is used as the main access to Rye and Camber Sands. When there's football matches and cricket matches on, the top of the village is totally full of parked vehicles along the left-hand side of the village again. And also tonight, before this meeting, I took a walk around the back fields. There's quite a few areas that are flooded there at the moment. And to me, the back fields are full of water. It's more like marshland. What's going to happen when we start concreting further areas, agricultural areas? Because surface drainage water flows much more quickly than a drip, drip, drip of water that normally sinks through the earth as it should do to join the water table. I think it's a totally inappropriate area to build on. And lastly, I'd like to say that many of the villagers here walk their dogs for years and years. It's open space, it's green space. We have COVID, a respiratory disease at the moment that's causing a hell of a lot of problems. People need to get out of their homes. The mental health of people are suffering at the moment, but these areas of green space within villages actually help enormously in coping with troubled times as we're in at the moment. So I feel it will be disastrous to start building more and more housing estates, and I can see all that will happen is it will eventually join to be one big sprawling housing estate like's happening in Ashford at the moment. And I know the general public are absolutely appalled with the amount of building that is taking place on the periphery of Ashford. People have had enough.
Okay, off you go.
Thank you very much. Jill, next.
Let's move on.
Sorry, just a quick thing with the access. I don't know if anyone's thought, they've got a bit where you have to give way to allow sort of vehicles through, obviously, like they say, to slow it down. What happens if you've got several large vehicles, especially like construction, when it's dustbin day and things like that, and you've got traffic trying to go in, they're waiting for traffic to come out, so it's going to back up the cars and that behind those, and if anyone wants to go right, they can't turn right because of the parked cars. So, you know, it's just, I might be wrong, but I just can't see how it won't back up sometimes. This village right now, like they've had their surveys done, has been done when we've been in restrictions. So the levels of traffic and noise and everything else is nothing like normal. The flow of traffic we've got now is nothing like in summer when you've got all the through traffic going to the St Port towns of Rye.
Absolutely.
And so there's no reflection currently on normal traffic flow patterns. So any surveys or anything done at the moment will be totally wrong and sort of balanced, really. So that's all I wanted to say is that there is a real sort of possibility we could end up with an urbanised traffic issue in the middle of the village with backing it up when you've got larger vehicles with dust carts and I say construction. Can you imagine the construction lorries? What on earth is going to happen if you're trying to get construction lorries in there? And you're going to have traffic control during construction and things like, where do the parked cars for Swan Cottages go? They've got nowhere to go. So, sorry, I'll stop now. Anyway, just my last thoughts on that one. Thank you.
Thank you, Jill. As a small technical point, my understanding is that, however bizarre, what they call disruption during construction is not a planning issue, and that doesn't matter to us really, but it matters very much to Ashford. They can put in conditions for how it has to be done, but the disruption is not a planning consideration. I mean, that's just the rules, I understand it.
Yeah, but
besides, that's what it is.
There'll be disruption anyway.
It could be terrible. I understand it could be terrible. Your point you made, I can see.
Yeah. Okay, I'm off.
Does anyone else want to speak on Lloyd's Green before I hand over to Daniel to give us his thoughts on those points? We may have answers, I hope, to some of them. Nobody else? Okay, Daniel, would you like to spend just a few minutes, please, and then we'll move on to the other side?
Good evening, all. I'll go straight to it. I will go straight on to access and try and go to answer some of the questions that have been raised and concerns of the local residents. Obviously, listening to your concerns tonight, I've been noting them, and I will do my best to try and address them even after tonight's answers. With respect to where we are, we've obviously been for a pre-app with KCC. That comes back to national standards that are required. I realise that people are concerned about some of the comments that have been raised on the widths, etc. With response to some of those, our access has been addressed, to be frank, it's been changed from Ashford's requirements, who required it to be narrow. That's where the 3.1 pinch point came in. I will discuss it with our team again tomorrow, obviously regarding the access as well, to see about widening that, the pinch point. With regard to driveways for houses, that's something that I'm happy to investigate. Also, I was thinking to myself tonight, if the parish council were to propose it, obviously we can't, propose that because our transport survey has met all the requirements from KCC. So all we can do is abide by the national guidelines. But if the parish council were to propose traffic calming measures, for that area, then we would be keen to join that as well. With regard to the internal access of the site, as you're fully aware, is outlined. So it's mainly, obviously, the detail is only on the detailed access. So I won't go on to discuss the internal layout of the outline application. Although, the scheme that you see shows, an achievable development. With regards to the AONB, and giving you some of the history of the site, I think as you're aware, the scheme was 40 units put forward through the local plan by Ashford Council. That was removed at the inquiry. The pretext of that was with regards to the best bit about, I think the main benefit for this site is the defensible boundaries. The inspector, however, at the inquiry found that the northern part of the scheme was viewed from the abutting field. So if you were to look through from the footpath or that field into the scheme, then the development was visible. Hence why we removed, have gone back to a development boundary inside of the current Lloyd's Green boundary, and reduced the scheme from 40 units to 23 units. I think when it comes to AONB, it is a very difficult issue to assess on different criteria. But I think on this site, I think members should be aware, in my experience, AONB arguments, the biggest principle is the visual impact of these schemes. And really, on this scheme, we are consolidating the existing settlement instead of expanding it. And I would go as far as to say this area of land is the only area of land in Wittersham, which is obviously all covered by the AONB, which is in that sense deliverable. Any other area of land that was to come forward would set a precedent, and for all sides of Wittersham. And I don't think it should be underestimated the importance of that, because you could open Pandora's box, so to speak. Because I feel that then once you've got that precedent, it does open all areas of Wittersham for future developments. Which this site, I do not believe at this moment in the argument of AONB, I feel there's very good defensible boundaries for that. With regard to flood and drainage, with regard to the floods, from the flood point of it, I think that members should be aware that it's a greenfield, obviously at this moment. From our surveys, it will actually be an improvement in the current flood position. When obviously we would have a tank system, so all flood water would be collected from the the hard surface, permeable surface for footpaths, etc. And driveways, and the water that comes off the buildings will be collected, kept down in storage tank underground, and will be released at a lower rate than would actually be achievable in everyday life, especially when there's a large downpour or storm. It would actually be better than the current green field. With regard to drainage, the infrastructure, can be a benefit in this sense, where obviously major developments come forward. Obviously, Southern Water then would have a works agreement, and they would have to, obviously with obligation for payments, they would have an obligation to make sure that there was sufficient capacity for all local residents, and improvements would have to be made accordingly. With regards to ecology, we don't have any great-breasted newts on the site. There are, however, great-breasted newts nearby. We proposed two ponds in the northern part of the site. and also a footpath area, which would be a cycle path for the benefit of the local community, to link up Jubilee Field, going round the northern part of our site near the ancient woodland and the ponds, etc., coming back up into the site into Lloyd's Green. And that would actually be, on ecology points, would actually be a net gain in net biodiversity. Lastly, traffic, in answer to one of the last points about the traffic surveys, our surveys were actually carried out in 2019. So this was before COVID. So all the traffic data is current, and it's not in COVID. It hasn't been carried out while we've all been in lockdown. So you can rest assured you don't have to worry on that issue. I think, I know obviously residents are worried about what we're trying to do here regarding development. I can understand that, but we are not trying to build a scheme here of just something that's not going to benefit the community. This will link Lloyd's Green with footpaths, etc. Nice open green space. It's going to be. There's going to be some beautiful features to this, to the northern part of the site, the pond system that we're going to improve or implement and put in, and overall public footpaths that are going to be implemented between Lloyd's Green and Jubilee Field. I hope that with regards to the refuse lorries and that you just mentioned yourself, obviously I will, with the transport, as I said, we will discuss this and look at ways to try and answer and alleviate some of the concerns of the members that they raised tonight. And I will raise this with our team tomorrow and see if there's some improvements that we can come up with to the current scheme.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Hope that helped.
Yeah, thank you very much. Before we move off of Lloyd's Green, does Jill, you want to come back on something maybe that Daniel said or something else that you thought of? Well, you've just turned your video off.
Yeah, I know. Sorry about that. Just a couple of things. The ponds, no great crested newts. On all of your documentation, there are missed 2 ponds that are very, very close to the site. One boundaries the site, and it has been known to have great crested newts in because it's the White Cottage. Have you looked at that one?
I believe all adjacent to the site, yes, all sites have been surveyed. That's all sides up to Lloyd's Green. I think there's about half a dozen ponds. From
your images I'm looking at, there is no ponds on any of your documentation in the White Cottage and farm.
There should be a list of all the ponds in the ecology report and the GN2 survey. Have you seen that?
Yeah. As far as I can tell, those 2 haven't been checked.
Well, I will have to check, our data tomorrow. But all the adjacent, I understand that there were 6 ponds. All the adjacent ponds were surveyed.
I know they've done the one down the bottom of Lloyd's Green, join boundary down there. I know you've done the Poplar Farm have got ponds, and I know they've done the one in the green area, the community area. And I know some have been mentioned at the Smitings, but the White Cottage is in the southwest corner.
Sorry. I was just going to say, sorry, it's difficult with this Zoom to talk. All the ponds adjacent to the site, even going into Lloyd's Green, were surveyed. There were a couple of residents that would not let us have access to their ponds in rear gardens. That might be one of the ponds, but there was only, I think, 1 or 2 wouldn't let us have access and survey their ponds.
Right, so technically you can't honestly say for sure that there aren't any, because in March they migrate into the long grass, which is right outside, which is where they breed, and then come back to the pond afterwards. So you can't say for sure that there would not be great crested newts in the White Cottages pond, because there was previously, when the previous Zoe was living there, and she had the house, and she said they had got them. So, and then there's Leeds Farmhouse as well that's got a pond, so I can't comment on that one. But just so that was known. Then you said about the loss, the hard. You're doing so many paths and all these different things and footpaths, and it's going to be so much better. I would argue that because it's hard surf. It's hard. You're losing the green space of the countryside. You're turning it into hard surface. It's not the same. It's not better. It's not what this is about.
Exactly.
We're a rural settlement, and if you keep build, especially on the northern side of the village, it's overloaded with all the building has been done on the northern side, except for Swan Cottages, obviously, which was done years ago. And it's just like filling in the puzzle, and that's not what a rural settlement is about. That's not what rural life. You should get viewing a site from a public footpath, several hundred yards away is not the point. It doesn't matter if you can see it or not. It's how it is in the landscape and how it is in the countryside. It's the bigger picture. It's not just being able to see a house from here or see a green field from there. It's the thing as a whole. And on the northern side of the village, it's just filling in the spaces, and eventually it will just all be houses on this one side, and that's why a lot of people are not very happy, and I don't see actually improving it. I really don't.
Well, I appreciate you. Obviously, we've all got opinions. I'm just saying the point is, I think if development is going to come, which Wittersham is in need of development. According to
tell me what the need is. What?
But if I can just finish, I think sort of what this site allows is it doesn't allow that perception of built development all throughout Wittersham. If you want, it's entirely obviously perceptions, but I think when you're driving through a town and you've got a feeling of seeing new housing developments built up all over it, that will give me a different perception than something that most people will not be visible, to the local, to the majority of people, and even the local residents. There's not going to be substantial. There's a lot of green space between this development. We're not building right up alongside people's houses. We're trying to give big buffer zones. We're trying to take into the account of how people would be affected, and we're not trying to just suddenly squash a load of houses in here that are going to blight people's lives. I can assure you of that. We're not that kind of developer, and we are trying to look at how this actually helps link Jubilee Field, links the play area, trying to increase it's just the areas in the northern part, but that's what we're trying to do. I think the sound's gone.
Okay.
Jeremy, I can't see any other. I'm just mindful, Jeremy, of the time, in the sense that I originally booked this call for 2 hours, and we've got about 40 minutes for Stocks Road, and I think a lot of people said that this is a really important issue as well. So whilst I don't think for one moment the comments to be made so far are unimportant, I think we do need to get a balance in terms of our time, if I can point that out.
You're quite right. Let's do that now, Jill. But I know you've made a lot of good points, and Daniel has responded as he can. Let's move on to Stocks Road then. And thank you, Paul. So let me find my notes again. As I said with Poplar Road, there were a few thoughts. As far as Stocks Road is concerned, opposite the garage, the thoughts that I reckoned as starters that there will be the numbers and the layout of the houses and the bungalows, affordable and marked. But this is where we've got the details here. The style adopted by the proposals with the segregated vehicle and pedestrian access arrangements, the impact on neighbouring properties and on the AONB, and any other points or details. And before I come to Roger, who's going to attack me on the footpath straight away, let me just remind people, if they haven't been and found this in the application, because it's a very big application, the plan is for 16 market housing units, of which 5 are 2-bedroom, 2 are 3-bedroom, and 9 are 4-bedroom. And that 16 splits down into 11 houses and 5 bungalows. The bungalows is quite important because our housing survey downsized when they were getting older. So it's 5 2s, 2 3s and 9 4s, and out of that 16, 11 are houses and 5 are bungalows. I haven't split that in bedrooms, but obviously the bungalows are usually the smaller ones. The affordables is 3 1-bedrooms, 6 2s and 3 3s. 8 of them are houses and 4 of them are bungalows. The 3 1-beds are all bungalows, I think. And the last one is 2 self-builds, which would be, I think, typically 4-bedroom. Okay, who would like to talk first then? Roger, sorry, I said already. Roger, you want to attack me on the footpath?
Unmute, Roger.
Unmute.
Thank you.
Right.
You done, yeah?
I didn't know I'd muted, but obviously I have. I'll very quickly, if I may, because we've now only got 40 minutes left on what is, frankly, the more important of the two, and we got off the subject and got on to Great Crested Newts. So I'm sorry, but we've all been waiting to get on. Now then, you talk about it as being opposite the garage. It is much, actually, more opposite 2 houses along the road past the garage. And it's the 2 houses, probably, arguably, there are plenty of us who are affected by it, but we will be totally affected by the what's going on, the build, the traffic, and everything. So I just want to make that point before we start. I believe that obviously the AONB is crucial in this. It is absolutely vital. We are part of the AONB and we should remain in absolutely with it. But the AONB have acquiesced in various other areas, Cranbrook as a very good example, and they may well do here. But without AONB acquiescence, then I think we object. If they acquiesce, I think we are on much more difficult ground. There are various aspects that have been mentioned already. Let me quickly get rid of those. The water drainage aspects and the sewage. Water down this road, not as bad as Swan Street by any manner of means, but the water down this road is, when it rains, the ditches fill up completely, and the water and the traffic. When I walk, since talking about when I walk, and kind of Phil to mention it, I have been seen to stand in the middle of the road waving the traffic down as it roars towards me past the 30-mile-an-hour sign at about 45, 50 miles an hour. I'm pointing at the water. It is just awful. It's become more and more difficult, more and more dangerous, and you get 2 cars passing, and they seem to think it funny that somebody at the side of the road, somebody walking, and there are lots of walkers, not just me. There are lots of people who are walking at the moment down, taking their exercise. The other aspect of water drainage is sewage we've mentioned, and I won't go into that at all. But the fields that are under question, the Piper's Field under question, never had when we arrived, it may have been there before, but when we arrived, never had this pond. We call it Lake Windermere, right opposite us. It's been there and is almost a constant feature. And I noticed right at the other end of the field, another pond. And it would seem that whether it's a sinkhole, what it is, I don't know, but there is a huge amount of water there, and I'd just like to know where it's going to go and what's being dealt with it. It's very, very important. I mentioned the speed signs. I think Mr. Chairman, you've mentioned that the speed signs are going to be moved. I think they need to be moved at least 600 metres up the road, probably to the Acton Road turn off. But that's another matter. Now, footpaths. The only reason I leapt in on footpaths was because I'm afraid what you were saying began to indicate that the council might already have made up the decision. This one's been resolved, you said. And it hasn't been resolved, has it? And I'm being fairly bullish on this because we're talking about it so that you, as the council, can make your decision next Tuesday. And therefore, things like footpaths haven't been resolved. And it only goes part way. The one that I have seen on the plans goes up just past Tile House Farm and then goes in behind the hedge and into the proposed development. That is only partially safe. I wondered, and it was mentioned, and a quick discussion you had with me, whether a pathway over the other side of the road from the bus stop to the town beyond might be another thing that you might think of to put in as a proposal. But overall, I think the view of Valerie and I is that with AONB acquiescence, we would not be over-objecting on it as long as all the safety can be dealt with properly and with absolutely, bearing in mind the way the village is moved. In the 10 years we've been here, things have got very, very much more busy, very much faster, and I'm afraid the SIDS don't really seem to do very much to alter that. Anyway, I think that's all I would want to say at this stage. We've said it all before. We said it when Landia were doing their development and trying it, and this will be the gist of what I will be putting on the Ashford side.
Thank you, Roger. A couple of clarifications. Firstly, when I said opposite the garage, I was referring to that by way of identification, not by way of the exact opposite, because if I'd said opposite Rogers or opposite one of the others, it wouldn't have made much sense to people, but they all know where the garage is. That's
Understood.
What that was.
Understood.
Footpath, I certainly wasn't implying that it was a done deal. What I was saying was to apply to Phil, who said it's dangerous walking up there if Stocks Road is done. And what I was saying was, and obviously there was an if in here, if it's built as planned, and that's all it is, then it includes a footpath which goes up as far as the just past Tile House and the orchard, which is owned by a different development, and dives into the side. And at that point, it went pretty much opposite your entrance. Now,
sorry, Mr. Chairman, that's not true. It's not opposite our entrance. There's still another 30 yards.
Oh, okay, all right. You've got a better knowledge there. Okay, a lot better than it was, but not solved. Okay, fair enough. Now, the last point then is the question of putting it on the south side, which I had thought of independently of yourself. I put that to the developers, and they thought that they would look at it, but there were difficulties. And because they mentioned land ownership, which obviously referred to the garage, or that was the essential thing, then I did have a word with the garage, and they said they'd have a bit of a longer think about it, but they weren't very keen. And since then, the developers come back and said they think actually their transport people think because of the bend in the road and the garage, it would be tricky. Sort of not ruled out, but it's hard. So I think that one I can probably say hasn't taken flight. I thought it would have been nicer that side. I thought actually the garage would appreciate it, but far from that, they said they didn't really want people walking across where they drive in and out. So, there you go. Next one.
John Newton was first, and then Greg and Kate, Jeremy. First John Newton, and then Greg and Kate.
Okay, John.
Jeremy, hi. Good evening. Can you hear me all right? Can you?
Perfect.
Can you hear me?
Perfect.
Obviously, there's a lot of negative comment around this evening about both these developments, but I just wanted to make an overall point. I want to address the parish councillors concerning the Stocks Road development. Now, this was previously put in for planning permission in a not dissimilar form. The parish council supported it. To develop in an AONB, you have to justify exceptional circumstances, and the parish council must have felt that there were exceptional circumstances in that case. The parish council's view was overruled by Ashford Borough Council, and subsequently that view was supported at appeal. I would just like to say to the councillors present tonight, when you have your meeting next Tuesday, you should seriously consider whether or not you can put forward a case of exceptional circumstance that will pass through both the filter of Ashford Borough Council, who were quite clear in their ruling last time, and then the risk that it may go to appeal. Do you have a strong enough case to support the application? As I say, there's a lot of negative feeling around tonight. That's not surprising. It would be most unusual for people who objected to these applications not to be the most vocal at this stage. But as I say, there is an overall point relating to development in an AONB, and I personally feel very strongly that there's a case here for rejection simply on those grounds, let alone all the minutiae that everybody has quite rightly brought forward in support of their objections this evening. So that's really the point that I wanted to make. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much, John. The point on AONB, that's been much discussed in the Parish Council in the past, with the extent to which the Parish Council is obliged under the Countryside and Rights of Way Act, Section 85, to have regard to the AONB. We don't ignore the AONB, we're in it, we know it, but whether it is a statutory duty on us or not has been much discussed. The advice we've had from the Kent Association of Local Councils and from Ashford as our principal authority and the planning authority is that it is not our statutory duty under the Countryside and Rights of Way Act. It is Ashford's. As I say, that's not to say we ignore the fact that we're in the AONB. We try to take as round a view as we can. But the balancing act, which is very tough on the AONB, which I tried to discuss before, and such as the point that Roger made, where in Cranbrook's in the AONB, I guess, but they're not seemingly being bought, they're taking a different view, and Cranbrook, of course, is not in Ashford, so, these things are looked at differently. But yes, we should consider the AONB, but I'm advised that it is not our statutory duty to do so. That balance is one that will have to be taken by Ashford. Now we've got Greg, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Jeremy. I've got a number of points, but I'll try and be quick. First of all, I should just say we live at Tile House Oast. We don't know everybody in the meeting, but we are adjoining this site. First of all, capacity. I mean, the capacity for the village to extend by these numbers has been discussed at length tonight. But I do share people's concern that schemes of this scale make a significant and sudden difference to a village. We're just counting the numbers. 28 dwellings will produce 142 people, or has capacity for 142 people. That's not including the 2 self-built houses. So that is a significant number of people coming into the village in one development. And I question the village's capacity to handle that on a number of levels. But certainly technically, with every development like this, of course, there become requirements on a developer to improve, to make contributions to improvements, including, for instance, traffic calming, drainage, and so on. But whether they will go far enough is a real question in my mind. We do have, as everybody says, significant drainage problems, and certainly the road past the orchard, Tile House, and our house is actually a stream for much of the time, which will need to be resolved, and is sufficiently far away from this site for a developer probably not to want to resolve it. So I raise that as a worry. I have concerns about safety. Roger's already covered this, but I should say that where it says footpath on the site layout, I don't think there is capacity to put a footpath along in front of the orchard between Tile House and the site without taking some of the orchard. The orchard is not on the application site and it's not part of the developer's ownership, so I suspect that actually putting a footpath here would be a problem. That, I think, is a real safety problem, because with that many people coming to this corner of the village, we're going to get a lot of footfall. And
especially if they're school users.
And indeed, in 142 people, there's going to be quite a lot of children. Thankfully, that's a good thing, but we've got to look after them. We also obviously have safety problems from the road, and traffic calming is a problem looking ahead. Just moving on to the scheme itself, one of the very nice aspects of this proposal is the amount of landscaping and green and planting, and it's already been said that that will create a good basis for ecology. But it won't happen overnight. the drawing showed trees which look to me to be at least 30 years old. And we have to bear in mind that for some time it won't look like that. We also have to bear in mind, or certainly the people who are going to live there have to bear in mind, that there's a significant cost to looking after a site that is so landscaped. And that cost is going to reflect on the affordable homes as well, in the form of whatever kind of service charges are being paid. So it looks optimistic to me in terms of quality, and I worry that actually if you strip it bare of the lovely landscape, it's a different scheme. So I think we need to be realistic about that. One of the aspects of this scheme is the separation of the road through the centre of the site from footpath, with a new footpath running along the backs of houses and running from Stocks Road through to the existing public footpath that goes along beside our house. That looks lovely, but again, there are significant maintenance and safety issues with that. And I worry, as a neighbour who actually adjoins the pond, that the proposals for the pond are, romantic. These ponds are dry in summer, flooded in winter, unsafe a lot of the time, and quite difficult. So to simply treat them as landscape features, I think, is not realistic and may actually have a safety problem associated with that. I think I'll stop there and let other people speak.
Jeremy, Zoe and Alex are next, followed by Spencer.
Thank you very much. Just one little thing to Greg on the ponds. We've been told in the past very firmly by Ashford, when we had a project years ago which did not take effect, to sort out the pond on the village green, which is by Jubilee Field, and is at the minute behind heavy thicket with an old wire fence that's been completely beaten down, but you can't really get in there because of the thicket. And Ashford were quite clear on the advice of their insurers that if anything was to be done with the pond to clear out the thicket so that the pond was visible, then it had to be open. You could not fence it off. The insurers said it's more dangerous fenced off than left open.
I am aware of that, Jeremy. Thank you for that.
That's ponds.
But Ashford can be wrong.
Indeed, all of their insurer. Okay, who did you say next, Paul?
Next is Zoe and Alex, followed by Spencer.
Zoe and Alex, okay. Zoe, wherever she is.
Good evening. Hello, everybody. We're reasonably new to Pear Tree Cottage, formerly Lismoyle Cottage. And my husband's going to speak mainly about it, but we've taken on board and agree with pretty much everything that everyone else has said. But we've got more personal concerns, really. Obviously agreeing with the environmental issues, but ours are quite financial.
We've, in the outline, it said between Tile House and Mount Pleasant. It actually, from plot 30 right the way up to the end of plot 22, is our land. That's our drive, and it runs past our cottage and into our field at the back. So it doesn't actually touch Mount Pleasant, it's Pear Tree Cottage. We bought a derelict house that was empty for 10 years, went into disrepute, just no one could live in it. We've spent close to 100,000 doing the house up. Totally cottage, which overlooks that land. Now, I'm talking financial, selfish, because for the last 45 years, this is where we wanted to retire, a quite quaint village, lots of land around us, so we can literally live peacefully. And this, for a living, I'm a contracts manager for a new build company. I know exactly what goes into building. I work for Red Road, Barrett's, Barclays. I really didn't want this on my doorstep, and whether it's selfish or it's not selfish, but to spend every penny that we've earned and saved, and then suddenly not even get a look in the emails that was sent to, I believe, to Daniel, he said they will respond to every email that gets put forward to them. We didn't get a look in, we didn't get an email, which is a bit customer care, not friendly, puts you on the back step straight away. No, I really don't want this development, and if this development goes ahead, I don't think we'll be staying here. apart from losing the money that I put into the property, we've then got to go and look elsewhere to retire, I think.
Thank you very much, Alex. Just to clarify for me, because I wasn't quite sure if I understood what you were saying at the beginning correctly, are you saying that the lane up to Pear Tree Cottage is on the boundary of the site?
Yes.
Or are you saying that they are claiming about the lane is theirs?
No, that's ours. That lane goes up to Pear Tree Cottage. We own, Zoe and I, and that takes us right up to the cottage, to our turning point, and then into our field.
So they're building...
It's the whole of that east side of their development, that's our property. So, yeah, and our house, our cottage, actually faces that field. We've just spent 3,000 cutting the conifers down, getting them all trimmed so we could look at it, and then a month later this came through, and that was a bit of a heart shock because we wanted to see the open fields.
Okay, that's fine, thank you very much. And who did you say came next, Paul?
Spencer.
Oh, hello, Spencer.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Several people have raised the question of these sites being development in the area of outstanding natural beauty. And I think it's worth spending just a little bit more time on that and the implications of it. It's worth starting with Ashford's planning officer's assessment of the Stocks Road site when refusing the previous application. If I just read that, the planning officer said such visual linkages to the surrounding countryside of the High Road AONB are considered to contribute significantly to the character of this part of the village. And the urbanisation impact on Stocks Road that would result from a development of this scale in this location would be harmful to the rural character and appearance of the eastern part of the village, and the Stocks Road in particular. In this regard, the proposals would be contrary to the NPPF, which gives the landscape and scenic beauty of the AONB the highest status of protection. So, accepting that the AONB that we have might be one of the largest AONBs, the policy, as far as I understand it, relates to all of them irrespective of size, and that's a development in the AONB which may or may not cause significant harm, is to be refused. That's the stated policy which neither of the planning consultants and either of these applications make any reference to at all. So starting with a refusal, the default position, how can you get planning consent? The only way in which you can get planning consent, as far as I understand it, is by satisfying exceptional circumstances. Not normal, general or special circumstances, but exceptional circumstances. That relates to the site itself and not just to the need. So a housing need or even an affordable housing need is not an exceptional circumstance. It needs to be a local, in my understanding, a local housing need. So the housing survey identified, I think it was 7 local housing needs, which needs to be compared with all of the disadvantages and disabilities that everybody else has spoken to this evening, which I won't repeat. So are you going to allow these 2 major market developments to satisfy what actually is a very small housing need? If you take the general 40% requirement for units of the size of the development that's proposed, the actual local needs housing is about half what will be provided. The rest will go to general affordable housing need. So that's the decision for everybody that's here tonight. I think the parish council, whilst it may not have a statutory obligation to make that decision, it needs to look for themselves as to whether they think the potential damage to the village, which will be long term, justifies what seems to be a decrease in short term housing need. That's really all I've got to say. That applies equally to both of these schemes. The quote from Stocks Road, but the AONB issues relate to both developments of this size.
Okay. Thank you, Spencer. I see Danielle has got her hand up.
Yep. Stuart Hibbard. Those that know us know who we are. Live in Poplar Road. I just want to firstly reiterate the traffic issue with regards to the access on both, actually. There will be a major implication to the village. The other thing that I want to bring up is that we should be extremely proud where we are with regards to our night sky. It's a very dark area. It's recognised by those that look into those types of things. If we take on board these two developments, we'll have even more light pollution. So it's a small thing, but it's something I think we should all be we should take on board.
Thank you. That is what I think we call one from the left field. But you're absolutely right, of course. We are relatively dark skies. We're not quite as dark as bits of Woodchurch. Ashford has been vacillating for a long time as to whether they were going to adopt the Dark Skies initiative. I have seen them mention it recently, but I haven't seen whether they actually adopted it. But they've certainly been kind of, yes, we're very keen, but we're not sure if we're going to find it rebounds on us. Now they've got the new street lights and they're trying to get rid of some of the lights in the village. But that's been held up by the crisis. Then actually we may head in that direction more. All the yellow lights they will want to either get rid of or change to the white ones, which are more dark skies friendly. That's on the stops with a small s. Okay, who's next?
Lara.
Yeah, I'll just unmute myself. The worry about the Stocks Road development is the sort of the ribbon effect that somebody who's worked in this sort of field for a long time has raised with us, and the ribbon effect, it will start at Stocks Road, but it won't necessarily finish there. And I think that should be a concern. It's not necessarily a planning concern for Stocks Road, but it should be a concern for everybody in the village that, where will the ribbon effect stop? And I'm not necessarily convinced it will stop at Stocks Road.
Yeah.
Sure. I take your point, Mervyn. It's a good one. I've discussed this with people in the past. My thoughts are that there are a limited number of roads in the village, and the tendency in rural areas is that, of course, the houses just spread out along the roads. So you build one on the front, then you build one next to it on the front, and so you go on. The only way you avoid the ribbon development being worse is when you build in from the main roads, and you then have to build the road yourself. And that's how we get the Meadows, where I am. It's how we get Fortune Eves, Jubilee Fields, Lloyd's Green, Coombe Lands. They are where you don't get the ribbon in the same sense. You actually put more houses for a limited frontage on the main road. Now, you're right to say that if you do that, you can then do the next one along the main road, and on that basis, you can go all the way to Rye. You're quite right. But, apart from the marsh. But, in a sense, by building back from the road, you get less ribbon than if you don't. I have had, chatting away with people in the past. Why don't they give approvals for biggish sites with a very long build-out? But it seems so that you don't have 30 houses at once, which some people have made a very good point about being very difficult to absorb. You take the famous 5 a year that Miriam used to talk about at council meetings, or the 3 a year on average, which I said it was up to 5 for Miriam. I said call it average 3. So your 3 a year takes 10 years. But you don't build 3 a year going along the main road, you build it back from the main road. And I've been assured that is really, really difficult. It's difficult for cash flow, difficult for engineering, difficult for disruption. But otherwise, you're right about the ribbon effect. Everything moves along the road.
Yeah, the ribbon effect won't affect a lot of us because we're probably going to be 6 feet under. But it is an issue that as a villager we should consider as a threat. And it is something that it will concern future generations.
Yeah. That's the question.
Jeremy, can I just make a point? In terms of Jeremy, can I make a point? I think Lara and her husband had their hands up, then Phil, and then Brian Smith. That's the one I noted. So
no, I saw Brian, but we go to Lara first.
I'm off.
Okay, where's Lara?
I'd like to speak as well, please.
Oh, Lara, yes.
Yeah, okay. Sorry, guys. Okay, so quickly, again, with these developments, it refers to Wittersham multiple times as a highly sustainable location. Perhaps that could be explained to me why Wittersham is considered highly sustainable. But I'm also aware, obviously, it also says Wittersham has facilities such as the bus route, which I'm assuming isn't going to be in decline in the coming years, like other bus routes. It says it has a pub, which it doesn't. Apologies if anyone's on this chat who owns the building or has indeed plans to restart the pub, but it doesn't have one currently. And also, I'm assuming the school, the primary school, has been referred to and given the ability to say whether or not they could squeeze in an extra, perhaps 30 children. The numbers of obviously children within houses is entirely changeable, but at some point, Laura and I would, I'm sure we'd like to start a family. I don't want to push this subject, but we would love to have our children going to the school. But if there was suddenly an influx of 30 children coming into the village, the school has to be prepared for that, as well as the businesses. I'm sure would love extra business. The shop, the bike shop, the antique shop, they would love extra footfall. But as a highly sustainable location, I'm not entirely sure where that comes into with Wittersham. Thank you.
Good point. It's not as sustainable as more urban locations, unquestionably, and that's the sort of phrasing that I think they just throw in. The school, I think, is a bit of an issue. It depends how many classes they run in each year, or 2 years they do it in. And we do bring a lot of children into Wittersham from the way outside, like as far away as Appledore or further. So in some ways, there is capacity for children to be blended in from Wittersham, subject to when they arrive and which class they're in, providing the children who are being brought in from further away then go in the opposite direction.
Can I just add something on that? Because we're very recent to the village, and we have a 3-year-old, and we've just been talking to the school, and the headmistress made it pretty clear to us that they are at capacity as it is. The classes are as big as they can be. So I just wanted to flag that.
Well, as I say, I know it moves from time to time. Last I heard, or we heard, that there was capacity in certain places, but they have had a growing role lately, so maybe they've absorbed it all. Thanks very much, Alex. Who's
Phil was next.
Phil. Off you go, Phil, wherever you are.
I won't dwell on this too long, but going back to the comments made earlier on, I'm all for the AONB, like most people are, but one needs to understand that in a recent survey, this country's countryside was regarded as the most unhealthy ecosystem in the whole of Europe. So green fields may look good, but they're not always good. So if this is imposed on us, and I'm not sure we should get it anyway, I don't think we need all these houses, but if it's imposed on us, let's look at the way it's developed as a benefit, because I'm astonished that anybody can say that the health of our soil doesn't matter. It's vitally important. I've seen the number of insects in this village crash in the last 3 years. We've got sterile, dressed soil nearly all the way around us. We've got hedges being taken out. We've got trees being cut down wholesale around the village. And I've tried to do something about it, but nobody is out there helping me. So let's just bear in mind that if we do get it imposed on us, even if we don't want it, it could be much healthier for the people living there and for the rest of us, because the biophilia effect of nature is very, very important to us all.
Well, thank you, Phil. Who comes next?
Brian, is he still speaking, Leslie? No, okay, Miriam was next.
Miriam.
Yeah, sorry, my battery's about to run out, so I may get cut off. Right, okay, a couple of things that I wanted to pick up on was really this housing need, because basically this is the thing that they're going to play on as being exceptional circumstances. Now, when we filled in the Housing Needs Survey back in November 2018, the letter that the Parish Council sent with it made it absolutely clear that when we were filling it in, it was to gauge our support for a small scheme that might benefit the community, talking about affordable housing. And we're now ending up with a scheme that is being justified on the basis of what is a reduced need, a very small need compared with previously. When we went to the inspector in 2016 and he refused it on the basis of the need then, the need was for 17 affordable homes. We're now down to 7. So the need, I think, as Mervyn said earlier, is actually reducing. Now, I know from attending parish councils over many years, there has been a long-standing need for a couple of bungalows. That has definitely been there. Now, I believe, and I've actually been in touch with Ashford Housing, and they seem to be open to the idea that they might have land in the village where they could deliver a couple of local needs bungalows for these elderly people who want to stay in their village. And I'm absolutely behind a scheme like that. The ones that have been built at Jubilee Fields, the 4 up there, are absolutely lovely houses. I was absolutely staggered when I went into them. They are spacious, they are so well designed, and I know 2 of the families there, and they are absolutely over the moon with those houses. And one of them said to me, "This will be my forever home." And I thought, how wonderful that, they'll be able to stay in our village, lovely girls I've known since they were very small, staying in the village. That's what local needs is about, and I'm fully behind it. But we can never justify what is being thrown at us now for the needs of these few people. And I am pretty certain that when people tick that box about needing to downsize or needing a home, their expectation was not that they were going to get 53 houses to deliver that. I really feel strongly that they would not, because it says quite clearly here, it's for a small scheme. And that's what I believe the Parish Council should be doing, supporting a small scheme. And for the 4 at Jubilee Fields, only 2 could be given to local people because there was no other families that qualified for them. So there were people outside the village. And I've got a problem with people outside the village at all. But if we're talking about local needs, then it's really for the village folk. And I'm fully behind that. Just a quick thing about the traffic on the Stocks Road. As most people know, I live up there too. I was absolutely staggered at the results of the speed survey that the developer did, that the actual speeds, no one is keeping to the speed limit. And the actual speeds that they've had to work on in order to get that access is 44 miles an hour in one direction and 45 in the other. They're having to have visibility displays for what you would have in virtually a 60 mile an hour, 90 metre visibility displays, which is obviously going to mean that hedgerow is going to have to come out. And Phil is talking about losses of hedgerows. Okay, I don't know much about farming practices, but we do need our agricultural fields to grow our food, and we need them more than ever. Anyway, farming practices need to change, they need to change. But we definitely need fields to grow our food. I don't think anybody can dispute that.
No.
We don't need fields to grow our food. Okay, sorry. I thought that we would need fields to grow our food. And one other thing about the ponds, I think is absolutely right in terms of safety and footpaths. I mean, people might not know, but we actually did have someone die in that pond many years back, coming back from the pub, having had a few, and ended up in the pond. They're lovely to see, but they're incredibly difficult to maintain. They do dry out. I'm not encouraging getting rid of the ponds at all, but they are a problem in terms of landscaping. They do need a lot of attention. It can look lovely on a plan, but actually looking after a pond is a lot of work. So I don't think I've got any more points to make.
Right, Miriam, that's very helpful. Thank you very much indeed. Does anyone else, we're now at 8 o'clock, does anyone else want to add anything briefly?
Can I just answer one thing very briefly, Jeremy?
Is that Phil? Yeah.
Yes. Yes, of course we need space to grow food, but we're the third most obese nation on the planet. We have too much food.
Right, okay, rations. Right, thank you. Can I then wrap this up? I think it's been an extremely helpful meeting, very valuable. Let me pay credit to everyone. This has been an extremely constructive, I won't say well organised, because that sounds as though it was me that was doing it, but everyone has organised themselves very well, so that it's gone, I'd have to say it's gone more smoothly than I thought might have been possible, bearing in mind the problems of Zoom. I've been in some other big Zoom meetings and they can be very, very difficult. So thank you everyone for your patience, for your time, for your thoughts and ideas and criticisms. And if that is it, then I will, yes, just thank you all for coming. I've written loads of notes. I'm sure Yvonne has written loads of notes. And councillors will try and get their minds around it all when they come to make a decision next week.
I'd like to say thank you, Jeremy and Paul, for a wonderful event. It's been a very good discussion.
Well, thank you.
I agree.
Good, thank you, Roger. And thank you, Spencer, I think I saw. Okay. Well, I'm grateful to everybody, and let's wrap up. Paul is giving us a clap, so that's all, a clap. So that's all good. Thank you, Roger. Okay, thank you everyone. Good evening and time for dinner.